This is the InnoCN 39G1R, and it's a fantastically good buy, primarily aimed at gamers, but honestly, everyone can benefit from such a big display. In fact, you can get this 38.5-inch, 165Hz variable refresh rate behemoth of a monitor for as little as $500 euros pounds, though you may also find an on-page coupon or Black Friday sale, bringing it down to closer to 400. At either price, it's a steal, so surely there must be a catch. I'm James Bruce, you're watching MakeUseOf.com reviews. This is the InnoCN 39G1R. Construction is relatively simple given it only comes in 3 pieces: the display, the stand, and the legs. However, I'll admit I had problems getting the stand to latch securely onto the rear and narrowly avoided catastrophe when lifting it back up, and it wasn't actually attached correctly, so do check that. Once you've got the back latched on securely, place the legs on and then secure them with a single screw from underneath. As for cable management, there's no channel in the stand to run the cables. However, there is a port cover and a hole to run cables through the stem. You'll find 2 HDMI 2.0 and 2 DisplayPort 1.4 ports. Unfortunately, if your cabling is a bit large, the port cover barely fits back on. I found angling the monitor just ever so slightly was enough to create just enough force on the port cover to pull it back off again. So I'll probably just leave this off. I mean, it's not essential. It's more useful if you're looking around the back of the display. So the InnoCN 39G1R is a rare breed of white electronics. It even ships with a selection of white cables, 1 DisplayPort and 1 HDMI cable. Although it's sold as a curved gaming monitor, technically this is a 3000R curve. So the curve is so slight that it's barely perceptible, to me anyway. That's probably a good thing, making the 39G1R suitable for both gaming and everyday office work where people tend to prefer a flatter profile. So this is overall a good balanced option. On the rear you'll find a diagonal line of LEDs. They're not bright enough to act as any sort of bias lighting, nor do they sync up to on-screen content in any way. You can manually configure them to your choice of 7 different colors or just disable them. If your monitor is sat in the middle of the room, you might appreciate that little bit of flare, but otherwise you won't even notice they exist, certainly not bright enough to reflect back, so best turned off in most cases. The lights you can see at the moment, these are Govee lighting on my wall, nothing to do with the monitor by the way, so don't think it's the monitor doing that. Now the 39G1R product specs claims to be VESA mountable, but I think that might be a mistake because I don't see any mounting points, and it would be tricky given the large circular area into which the bracket inserts. As it is, the legs have a very large footprint and you probably would have benefited from a VESA mount, but you can't. Unlike the small solid metal base of most monitors, the 39G1R relies on a tripod leg structure. It's certainly, stable enough, but requires no less than about a foot of depth on your desk. And while you obviously wouldn't be cramming a 39-inch monitor onto a tiny desk in the first place, that's still a hefty footprint for any size desk. Controlling the display is done with a single nub-like thumbstick underneath in the middle here. Tap in any direction or click to open the first menu and click again to turn off the display. You can also navigate to the full on-screen menu like that. From that first screen you can also control the lighting and enable gaming mode, which is basically just a customizable crosshair in the middle of the display. My biggest frustration using this menu system is just to swap inputs. You might have thought putting input swapping onto that quick menu would have been perhaps more useful than changing the color of the rear LED, but seemingly the only way to do so is in fact to open up the full on-screen display menu structure, and then to swap from, say, HDMI 1 to DisplayPort 1 is no less than right, 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 down, down, right. On the other hand, if you shut down one input, it will automatically switch over to another, so it's only annoying half the time. Meanwhile, opening up the full menu also reveals the standard bevy of settings that you can tweak and supports things like picture-in-picture display mode. The resolution is 2560 by 1440, otherwise known as WQHD, and considering this is for gamers, primarily PC gamers, I think that's sufficient. While 4K gaming is a bit of a luxury, most people don't have gaming PCs capable of running at such absurdly high resolutions anyway. Obviously, with such a large monitor though, running at 1440p will mean some fairly low pixel densities at around 76 dpi. And you'll sometimes see jaggies or pixelation depending on how close you sit to your monitor. It claims to cover 99% of the sRGB gamut and supports HDR10, although with 350 nits peak brightness and no local dimming, this is still somewhat limited and not the same as a TV HDR would look like. But SDR content will still look incredible. The panel technology is VA with a 3000:1 ratio, meaning that you can get some deep blacks on this, and it's a glossy screen, which also helps out there. However, that does mean it's not great with ambient lighting. You're going to get quite a lot of reflections. While the headline refresh rate of up to 165 Hz will smooth out sort of high motion gaming, as a VA panel you may still experience some ghosting. However, you can overdrive the response time in the on-screen display to mitigate this if you find it problematic. So how is it? Performance and gaming. First up, on PC, using the DisplayPort, I was able to select 165 Hz right from within Windows settings. No mucking around. It worked right off the bat. I turned overdrive on high as well. Now, assuming you have hardware that can even deliver those sorts of frame rates, you'll get superb visuals. In Cyberpunk, I managed to max out about 120 FPS with medium settings, and that looked incredible. I didn't notice any lack of sharpness from the resolution, but then again, I've never really been able to play Cyberpunk in 4K resolution because it's such a demanding game, so it's certainly not a downgrade for me. The brightness seemed right, the colours were well defined, and there were excellent details in the shadows, with black levels also superb. The benefits of a VA panel tech are really clear in a game like this. To really test that frame rate, I loaded up LEGO Brawls, which is simple enough of a game to run at the full 165 frames a second, and I promptly came first in every match I played. I'm not saying the high frame rate helped there, but actually, yes, it probably did. I did also want to try something strategy-based to see if the low pixel density annoyed me more, so I fired up Company of Heroes, but the added size of the map more than makes up for any loss of detail, I thought. Unfortunately, despite apparently being FreeSync compatible, it's not supported with variable refresh rate on the PlayStation 5. The maximum I could get out of it was a 1440p HDR 120 Hz. Now that's good enough for most people, good enough for me anyway, but don't buy this specifically for that variable refresh rate FreeSync support if you're on PlayStation. And I should add, this isn't uncommon. Sony has implemented a very restrictive form of variable refresh for some reason, which needs HDMI 2.1, and this doesn't have that. So for the highest refresh rates, you'll need to use the DisplayPort, and that's not going to work with consoles. I also ran through some ASO monitor tests, and a couple of points stood out to me that I hadn't noticed during sort of regular use desktop or gaming. Firstly, the uniformity was a bit off, with some slightly darker streaks from the lower left. This could also be seen a little in the gradient test, in which the bottom right was brighter and there was another bright spot a little bit of the way up. Switching over to a thermal camera, you can actually see why, because that seems to be where the panels are illuminated from. Now again, in real world usage, I couldn't notice anything like this, but there are clearly some slight uniformity issues with the brightness. Secondly, on the response rate test, there was definitely some ghosting. Most obviously on dark blue, which led to a sort of purple ghosting on the grey background, and bright red with some ugly brown ghosting. I think this is to be expected from a VA panel, as well as those minor uniformity issues on something at this budget. Lastly, best left unspoken is the built-in 2-watt speakers. They're functional, but no surprises there, they are monitor speakers. So should you buy the InnoCN 39G1R? In the sub $500 price range, the 39G1R simply cannot be beaten. For value and impact, the InnoCN 39G1R is a fantastic buy. It might not suit the most discerning of folk, but for most people, I think you'll be really pleased. Anyway, thanks to InnoCN for shooting this over to check out. I'm James Bruce, you've been watching MakeUseOf.com reviews. Until the next one.